That was our pastor, Jim Miller. Jim has been a Methodist minister all over Nebraska, Kearney and Hastings and Lincoln, and now he's minister of visitation here for some years at First-Plymouth. He works with our pastor KJ and teams in the church to visit folks in hospitals, every week in hospitals and nursing homes and shut-ins. This is the heartbeat of a church. I know we think of worship as such a primary function of the church, and worship is central. But the caring of souls, the being alongside those who are suffering, that's church. He just read Mark chapter 8. I'll be preaching on that, but let me begin with optical illusions. Now, I love optical illusions. I think they're really fun, but they can discombobulate your brain waves. Let me do that right now. Tom put up the first illusion. So I want you to look at the dot on the left. Just keep staring at the dot on the left. And so then that floating orb on the right will begin to look like it's moving diagonally, up to the right, down to the left, up to the right. It'll look like that, but it's not. It's moving perfectly vertically all the time. In fact, it might be hard for you to believe it. You might even have to trace with your finger that floating ball. Do it. Go ahead. Trace it with your finger on your tablet or iPad right now. It's perfectly vertical. Man, Patrick Cavanaugh, a neuroscientist at Dartmouth, he uses optical illusions like this to try to remind us that you don't actually see reality as it is. That your brain actively constructs a version of reality, and it can be wrong. Optical illusions are fun, but they can be a little vexing. Look at this one. These two squares, A and B, are exactly the same shade, exactly the same color, and they'll remain that way through this whole animation. But if you surround those two squares with other squares and a false shadow, it tricks our minds into thinking B changes color. Look at it. I mean, it's amazing. Throughout that whole animation, they're staying the same color. Justin Gardner, a neuroscientist at Stanford, reminds us that you aren't seeing things precisely as they are. Your mind is creating a version, and that version can be wrong. When there's a different context around those squares, they change color. Look at this next one. This one really gets me. The red box looks obviously smaller than the blue box. It's obvious, isn't it? Well, my friends, those two boxes, the red box you see flashing and the blue box you see flashing, are precisely the same size and in precisely the same location. But the motion of that animation is confusing your brain, and it's making a mistake. Justin Gardner, that neuroscientist, he says there's an odd little secret about brain science. Your brain is always a few hundred milliseconds behind reality, right? I mean, when you see something, the light hits your optic nerve, your retina, and an optic nerve takes it to the back of your brain where the visual processing takes place. But then that signal and thought has to work its way back forward through your brain. It takes time. So you're not experiencing reality in sync. Your brain is having to cast forward a little bit, so motion can trick our brain like that animation. Did you ever play baseball? The only way you can hit a fastball, is that your brain predicts where that ball's going to end up. It's moving too fast for you to make those decisions. But as that ball leaves the pitcher's hand, your brain is casting forward because it knows it's always behind reality. That's why I couldn't hit a curveball. I could never hit a curveball because to the eye, it looks like that ball is coming right at you. I'd always put my foot in the bucket and bail, but then it curves back in. You are slightly behind reality. Weird, isn't it? Or look at these parallel lines. They look squiggly to you, don't they? This is the classic cafe wall illusion. those lines are perfectly parallel. This one really bugs me. I had to pull out a ruler. You can do it now, or if you have a piece of paper, line it up on your computer screen. These lines are perfectly parallel and straight. But our brain is confused by background images and context. Our brains are easily confused. Now, here's another oldie but goodie. We're used to images that can look like two things. This image looks like a horse head or a seal. No big deal, right? Images can be ambiguous. Your brain wants to form a pattern and make it coherent. No big deal, right? But get this. They did a study with that image. If you give people an incentive, some self-interest, then they'll see it any way you want to make them see it. So for example, in one study they said, you'll get a special reward every time you see a farm animal. And then showed them a bunch of images just like that one, and they would always see the horse head. They would never see the seal if it was their self-interest to see a horse head. Optical illusions are vexing. And in the end, they should make us more humble about our perceptions or our opinions. They should make us slow down and realize my opinions about the world, my perceptions of reality, they can be off. So we should slow down, be more humble, be more open to revision. You know, we get so married to our opinions and perceptions. We think our opinions are ourselves, you know, we're so invested in them, but we can often just be wrong. So we need to be more humble. We form the opinions fast. Slow down, be more gentle, be more humble. We need to reduce the cost of being wrong in our society. I think we put so much pressure on ourselves and in culture. You got to be right. You better not be wrong. It's okay to be wrong. Just keep revising one's opinion. Get closer to reality. I think Jesus, in Mark chapter 8, is trying to help our brains override a wrong interpretation, an optical illusion. I think he's trying to cast off a basic optical illusion about how we see one another, not as full persons, but we see each other as a category or an image, or we have an idea of a person. We don't see a soul, we see an object. Did you see what this healing did? The blind man first is healed, but doesn't see clearly yet. There's still an optical illusion. I see people, he says, but they look like trees walking. He doesn't see full persons, not souls. And then Jesus heals him again, and now he sees persons clearly. The ancient church was really put off by this passage because they thought, how could Jesus have failed in the first attempt at healing? I mean, Jesus is perfect, he's omnipotent, and so they thought this passage was really uncomfortable, but sometimes Jesus is acting out a parable. I think there's a teaching in that this took stages to debunk this person's optical illusion. So one healing, and then finally he could see persons as persons. This is a basic optical illusion. You see, persons are invisible. You think you see them, that's an illusion. You see their body, you see their actions, but you don't see the person, the consciousness, the soul. A consciousness is a set of memories and hopes and expectations and strivings and dreams. You don't see that. But there's an optical illusion, and you form impressions about a person, but they are an infinite mystery and a depth of and complexity. You could never sum them up. You can't put a person in a category, but with that optical illusion, you start doing it. You need to remember that you're seeing persons, not walking trees. Optical illusions. You know, the Buddhists, they believe that they are debunking a basic illusion of life. A Buddhist version of reality that thinks that we fall into the illusion that reality is dual, that there's subjects and objects and separate things that are interacting. The Buddhists believe that true reality is one, that all things are one, and that dualism is an illusion. They have a non-dual sense of reality. Now, they believe in real objects in the universe causally interacting and such, of course, but they believe the real true impression of reality is when in meditation and then in nirvana or satori, they have this experience of non-dual reality, all things being one, and that is the truly veridical version, the true version of what reality is about. There was a Western thinker that had a similar point to make. The greatest modern philosopher. In 1724, Immanuel Kant was born in a German village to a poor harness maker and his wife. He was the fourth child of 9 children. Can you imagine this? Poor village life, 9 children. A local minister saw in the young Immanuel Kant, the 8-year-old, he saw unique intellectual gifts. And he conspired with the village to send this little boy off to a private school. Well, it would change Western philosophy forever. Kant became a professor, but then at the age of 57, here's hope. He made his major impact pretty late in life. At 57, he published his first book that would change everything, The Critique of Pure Reason. Kant's basic premise is that your brain, you don't perceive reality directly, that you cannot ever actually perceive reality, that you will receive sense impressions from the world around you, but then that's filtered through categories the brain already holds. He's saying, in essence, you construct a version of reality. You're never really in touch with the way things are. That basic humility then began to infiltrate philosophy itself. We can't really be sure of anything we're seeing, so know that. We're living in a major optical illusion right now, and it's causing a lot of human suffering. It's an optical illusion. We see race. You know, race isn't a scientific concept. The vast majority of mainstream scientists know that race is a social construction, not a biological reality. We've mapped the human genome. We know that human beings are about exactly the same, right? We know that variation among any one thing we call race is as wide as across the races, but we continue to see this optical illusion of race. 100 years ago, W.E.B. Du Bois, the great African-American sociologist and writer, he knew that. He knew we were making decisions about people based on an optical illusion, that race isn't a biological category, it's socially constructed, but we live in that illusion, and oh, the pain it causes. Human beings are human beings. We see a difference. We see phenotypes. Genotypes, we now know, are the same. But we see phenotypes, which are just the characteristics shaped by the environment, a little more skin pigment based on what part of the world you live in. You see the phenotypes, an optical illusion, and then you ascribe characteristics to it. Let me tell you something that hurts my heart. It's all based on an optical illusion. If you show Anglos a picture of a 10-year-old black boy, they can't guess the age. They see an older person, a less innocent person. This hurts my heart. They don't see a just pure, wonderful little boy. They see somebody older. It hurts my heart. Let me tell you another one. If you show an Anglo a picture of an adult black male, they will almost always overestimate how tall and how big that male is. They'll immediately jump to something more ominous and dangerous. It's an optical illusion. Hurts my heart. Jesus was trying to rid us of our optical illusions. That's what this healing in Bethsaida is about. I know when I'm with folks, I sense they're living in a couple really basic optical illusions. Number one, they perceive that they are mostly alone or separate. Now, I know during COVID, we all feel more isolated, but I mean anytime They have this illusion that they're pretty separate from anyone else, alone in life. And then the other illusion that piles on is that we feel inadequate, or that somehow we don't measure up. We're always comparing ourselves to each other, and we don't feel we're good enough. And so this basic illusion takes hold. You're mostly alone, and you're not really measuring up. And then life becomes this insecure enterprise, and we act out of those illusions. Let Jesus heal you today. You're not alone. We're more connected than you can imagine. I don't mean this in a full-blown, non-dual Buddhist way, but I do mean that it's in God in whom we live, move, and have our being. We are connected. We are together. And you're good enough. You're God-made. You're a child of God. Don't let that optical illusion take place. You see, what you'll do is you'll compare a weakness of your own to a strength of someone else's. So I see someone that's great at math. I'm lousy at math, and I imagine, man, oh boy, I must be really stupid. It's not fair to compare a weakness within yourself to a strength of another person. It's an illusion. Let Jesus heal you today, to rid us of these optical illusions, to live life more free, more truly. Amen. The optical illusion that I loved when I was a kid always happened on the highway in a car on a bright sunny day. Do you remember, or do you know how you see those puddles in the road? You always see that pool of water, and then when the car gets there, the pool of water that looks so real, it disappeared. Well, that's just light refraction, right? It's the same thing, the way light is refracted when you put a straw in a tall drink of water and the straw bends. By the way, don't use plastic straws, but you know what I'm talking about. That's just refraction of the light. It's just an illusion. Jesus Christ is the light of the world. Don't let it become refracted or warped. Anytime you see things with a greater compassion, anytime you see things through his eyes, the eyes of love, you're seeing the way things really are. Hear our beautiful benediction. God bless you.